For me, it was most exhilarating. I just knew I had to fly after I had that first flight. I knew I had to fly. They thought we were a little crazy because they didn't think women should fly airplanes. Besides, an aircraft didn't ask are you male or female, it just said, can you handle me? Like a good pilot I was, I went and dove in at them. And they had the best score they ever had that day because they sure as heck wanted to shoot me down. And thank God they didn't have any bullets in those guns.
What was it like when you went home on leave?
Oh, I tell you, if you didn't think I was a hot pilot, all you had to do was ask. We had 38 of our women killed in the service. They were not treated as military personnel. The family got a call saying, your daughter was killed in an aircraft today. We have her in a pine box. You send the money and we'll ship her home. And that was the way it was.
Elizabeth Bridget Wall was born November 15, 1919 in Faribault, Minnesota. She was the fifth of 6 siblings, 4 sisters and 1 brother. In his earlier years, her father Daniel and his first wife Catherine owned and worked a farm in Rice County in southern Minnesota.
If he didn't have a good horse or the horse didn't work, he did all the plowing by hand. And he had one of those old hand plows. His hands were so gnarled from doing it for so long that he couldn't straighten his fingers out.
When Catherine died, Daniel inherited her farm. Due to ill health, he sold both farms and moved to a boarding house in Faribault.
He had had a heart condition, and so when he moved to town, he was unable to work.
In 1910, Elizabeth's mother was a 30-year-old single woman living with her aunt and uncle across the street from Daniel. Julie had moved there from her mother's tiny house on the edge of town. Living there shortened the walk to her job at the Shaft Pierce Shoe Factory. In her youth, Julia, her widowed mother, and 5 siblings experienced more than their share of bad luck and hard times.
Her husband had died, and she married this gentleman, and he died. Of course, the man didn't figure out he was going to die, so he never made a will saying that Mama should get the farm. Her stepson came to live with her, and he was quite a gambler. And one night he went off and he was gambling, and she never saw him again. The next day the gamblers came and they said, your son lost the farm today, so Mama and all the family had to get off the farm and move to town. Her family lived in this tiny house, and she had all these children.
Daniel became acquainted with his neighbor and eventually asked Julia to marry him.
Mother didn't know anything about Dan Wall, so she went up to Father Slevin, who was a good friend of both families, and he said, Miss Lorem, if you marry Dan Wall, you'll be able to hold your head up high because he's a gentleman.
On November 26, 1912, Daniel married Julia in a small ceremony. He was 50, she was 32. Daniel bought a 3-bedroom house 8 blocks from the church where they were married. It was in this house that they raised their 6 children. With their house paid in full and money in the bank, the Wall family was prepared to enjoy a modest, untroubled life. Betty Wall was 10 years old when the stock market crashed in the fall of 1929. The effects of the crisis reverberated in every city and town across the country. Betty's family felt the impact too.
My daddy had sold 2 farms, and he was quite wealthy when he moved to town. After the crash, he had had his money in the bank, and he lost his money, and he was unable to work at that time. Thankfully, he bought our big old house before the crash. So that was why as soon as us kids got out of school, we'd go to work to bring the money home for Mother and Daddy.
The Wall children attended Catholic elementary school through the 8th grade. The 3 oldest daughters attended Bethlehem Academy Catholic High School. But when it was Betty's turn to go, the family couldn't afford the tuition. Instead, she was sent to public school. Betty was disconcerted by the relaxed discipline she found there.
The first couple of days, I thought I'd lose my mind. You see, at our school, we'd stay in line and be quiet and get in, and you wanted to answer the teacher, you put your hand up and all that sort of thing. And to go into this wild chaos, with people screaming and hollering and running around in the halls, to me it was so foreign. It was really like a foreign land. But once I got accustomed to it, it was okay.
And what were your favorite subjects?
To tell you the truth, I didn't think too much of school at the time. It was just something I had to do. But being a girl, you could only go into either home economics or bookkeeping and typing. And I really didn't want to go to either one of them, but I took bookkeeping and typing so I could get a job when I got out. As a child, I always liked to reach the highest height I could go. If I couldn't get any higher, I'd chimney up telephone poles, I'd sit in trees. There was a gentleman that used to come to the courthouse with his papers to file, and he used to speak about flying. And I thought, flying? Now that sounds interesting. I thought, well, now I could get higher than the top of the house. Then he asked me if I'd like to have a ride, and I said, oh, yes, I would. I went out to the local airport, and this fella had been giving people rides, and he loved to give them thrills. He said, well, come on, I'll give you a ride. It was a 65 horsepower Cub, which is a small aircraft, but to me it looked beautiful. We went up 3,500 feet into a stall, into a spin. And he looked around me. I said, one more time. After 1 more times, he didn't look around anymore. He landed that airplane. He said to me, he said, whatever you do, you should start flying. You're the only person that made me sick. I made everybody else sick. For me, it was most exhilarating. I just knew I had to fly after I had that first flight. I knew I had to fly. I had this bicycle, and And I used to go out the airport a lot just to watch them and wait around to see if someone would offer a ride. There were 15 fellows that belonged to this aviation club. Mostly they were older men who had business that could afford to fly. Al Vogel was one, Hank Vogel was one, Frank Medichek was another one. But you see, this was in 1942 when the war was on, and one of the fellows had enlisted in the Air Corps. Then when this fellow went into the service, they asked me if I'd like to join their club. And
Why did they ask you?
because they knew I loved to fly. They could see that I would really enjoy the airplanes, so they asked me to join them. And I asked them what it would take, and they said, "Oh, it only costs $100." Geez, I never saw $100 a month. Anyway, I went down to Mr. Cowell at the security bank, and I said, "Mr. Cowell, I'd like to borrow $100." $100, Miss Wall, what do you need that much money for? I said, "Well, I want to join a Sky Club." Oh, he said, "Women don't fly?" I said, "Well, this one's going to." So he said, "Well, what do you have for collateral?" "I have a bicycle." And unbeknownst to me, I thought this is the way the banks did business. He co-signed my note, and he took my bicycle for collateral, and I got my $100. I love to tell this story to the bankers. The war was on, and I belonged to the Civil Air Patrol. We were supposed to protect our borders in those beautiful 65-horsepower Cubs. We took it very seriously. We had to learn the Morse code, the da-da-da-da-da. And then we also learned to march. We took some paper bags of 5 pounds, and we put flour in them and pasted them all together. And they drew a great big chalk circle on the edge of town. And then we'd go and we'd drop these bags of flour to see if we could hit the center.
Air-minded America organizes its civilian pilots for patrol duty out over the vast open spaces of the West. Taking off on regular scheduled flights, they range the skyways, keeping an eagle eye on the lookout for trouble. There, down below, a plane that's crashed. By two-way radio, the patrol flashes the location of the wreck. Headquarters relays the message to a mounted unit, and in a matter of minutes, a fully equipped rescue party is on the way.
It was very serious business for us because we thought that we were supposed to protect our country, and we would have.
Nearer the coast, the Civil Air Patrol's role was vital. With most of the Air Force utilized overseas, civilian volunteers were relied upon to scan the U.S. coastlines for German U-boats. By the end of the war, the Civil Air Patrol had discovered 173 enemy U-boats lurking offshore. A number of civilian airplanes carried out attacks, dropping depth charges and bombs, hitting 10 ships and sinking 2. In the end, 64 Civil Air Patrol volunteers lost their lives in the line of duty.
The latter part of 42, we heard that there was an organization called Women's Air Force Service Pilots. They sent a notice around to all the airports. They were looking for women who could fly. I had talked my sister Mary into coming, and also my friend Catherine Murphy. This is something I had to do, so we sent our information in saying we'd like to join the group. Then we had to have a flight physical at Fort Snelling, which was kind of different because there were only fellows in line. And then there were us 3 girls.
It's what qualified you to be accepted.
I think they were interested in what kind of a life we were leading, if we were good people and all that sort of thing. I think that was important to them. I was just so excited. I thought, I gotta get there. I don't care what they ask me, I'll tell them I just gotta get to Texas.
What was their reaction when you said, we're going to Texas?
Oh, they thought we were a little crazy because they didn't think women should fly airplanes.
Did anyone try to stand in your way?
I had a boyfriend, he didn't want me to go. He thought I should stay home. He had an airplane too. He thought I should stay home and fly his airplane. My mother, she wasn't sure, but she thought that if this was what I wanted, because she saw how I loved to fly. And my sisters were so supportive. So we went to Sweetwater, Texas. Sweetwater, Texas. I remember there were bars and they were all busy and they had fellas going in and out and the doors were open and we could hear all this cowboy music. That was my first impression of Texas. Never having left mother and my sisters and my brother. It was hard to begin with. My first time away from home. 25,000 women tried to get in because they thought flying sounded like fun, but they didn't have the qualifications. But 1,800 and some were taken in, so it was a very small group. Our barracks, we had 6 women on each side, and in the center they had the latrine and the showers and all. We had army cots, and we had little closets about this narrow. We'd eaten very meagerly at home, so when I got to Sweetwater, gee, I thought the meals were great. I had no complaints at all. We had girls from all over the country. In our class itself, we had a couple opera stars. We had a gal from Broadway and a professor, and then the gals like me that were working in offices and such. It was a very, very different type of crowd, and yet we all wanted to fly airplanes, so we got along beautifully. The ground school was so hard, I didn't have much entertainment. I had to study really hard because I knew I had to make the grades. So we had our dances once a month at one of the cadets' places. They'd take us in. We had an old cattle truck, and they clean it up pretty good. Two big long boards on the side, and they'd herd us in, and they'd take us to the field to go to a dance.
Do you have any recollections of these dances that you went to?
Oh, they were just great. We were supposed to bring our civilian clothes. The one time we went to a dance, and my friend Lois Story thought I had the suitcase, and I thought she had the suitcase, and we got there, and we didn't have any suitcase, and all we had was our uniform. And so we were deciding, gee, should we go in here? Those girls were all dressed so pretty, and fellas in all their uniforms, and here we were. But 2 good-looking guys came up and got us, and we went in. We had the best time of our lives. Heck, I didn't care if we ever put a dress on again. We had a wonderful evening.
What was there, live music or what?
Oh, yes, good live music. We had big bands. It was wonderful. Wonderful. At 12 o'clock, we all herded back in there and went back to the field. And they took count, too, to be sure we were all there.
This scene provides a pretty fair picture of what the girls look like from all angles. None of them are under 21 or over 35. Now, chinning yourself is a very wholesome kind of, thank you, sir, a very wholesome kind of conditioner for young ladies about to embark on a serious venture. Yes, they talk Army talk, and they wear GI clothes, but a very small, we'll call it a change of clothing, can remind her, among others, that she's still the softer, fairer sex, worried to death she's going to get her hair wet. The Army judges each girl not by her eagerness, but by her ability to fly. The little blonde on the right, with her hair bleached by the sun, you or I might judge by other standards. She doesn't. Lonnie, her name's Lenore Horton, is pretty serious about her flying, for the duration anyhow.
With the Depression and World War II, women took on jobs and responsibilities routinely reserved for men. Although women's new roles were seen as patriotic and essential, the increased number of women in the labor force didn't alter society's traditional views. Antagonism toward female workers, whether civilian or military, intensified. Jackie Cochran was in Camp Davis, North Carolina, to train a group of 25 women for advanced duties.
Another girl crashed while I was there and had a fractured skull. I went into everything carefully, and the answer was that there had been apparent sabotage. Sugar was found in some of the gasoline, and sugar in gasoline stops the engine in no time at all. 2 of the girls wanted to quit. Jackie Cochran.
I remember reading in your book, the reality of war, coupled with the number of people who wanted and expected us to fail, made us work all the harder to succeed.
That's true.
Who was it who wanted you to fail?
Well, the fellows, they really did not like our flying their airplanes, which is really understandable. After all, for them it was a mannish thing to do. And to have us go into that area where we were handling the planes just as well as, or better than, I shouldn't say, but oh well. Anyway, they just were not happy about that. They felt we were going to be on the same grade as they were, and they didn't like it. And that's okay. I understand, really do.
Sure.
I understand their feeling.
How do you know that they felt that way?
Well, every field we ever went to do any flying, they would be sure to check us out because they were sure we couldn't handle any aircraft.
So they didn't just accept you as peer
no.
pilots.
Oh, no.
They had to put you through some
Sure,
paces
and that's
first.
okay. I mean, I understand their feeling. I really do.
How did you overcome that?
By sure I could fly as well as they could. I flew formation with some of them, and I'd get too close, and he'd remand me on it. When I'd come down, I said, well, I thought we were supposed to fly close. You fly too close. And then we would dogfight in between, waiting for the airplanes to come along. Sometimes we'd forget to look at the plane. All of a sudden, we'd get a message over our intercom saying, watch for the next formation. You missed once. We'd get carried away. We became friends with all the fellas. I had a lot of good friends with the men at the time. We were only supposed to fly 4 hours a day, and that was the men and the women. because we didn't know anything about the G-forces at that time, but they just knew that diving, as we were doing all the time, it was kind of hard on a person's body. Well, I didn't believe them, so I'd go and I'd stand out there anyway when some of the fellows would come in. You know, Las Vegas, they'd come in looking pretty sheepish. And me sucking up oxygen on the B-17 trying to get sober. And then I'd ask anybody want me to take their mission. Oh, I had lots of offers. So I'd fly their mission. It didn't matter what they were flying, either the bomber or the Pursuit. I could fly any of them. And so I'd take their mission for them. Well, one day, they needed a mission flown over in Indian Springs. Now, Indian Springs was where our gunners went before they went overseas. And the fellow that asked me to take this mission, no problem, Wall. He says, all you have to do is do the same thing you did there and there, except they're on the ground, so you just can't go too low. And then you just dive in and they shoot at you, and that'll be it. Well, I had to go in and sign a statement saying I wouldn't go below 500 feet. I thought it said 50. I was coming up to this building, and the building was facing the north, and I was coming from the south. But when I get over the roof, I changed the prop pitch of that AT-6. Now that's a gorgeous sound. It's a roar. I turned around, every one of the fellows hit the deck. They thought they were being attacked. So I went up, and then as I was supposed to do, I went around like a good pilot I was. I went and dove in at them, and they had the best score they ever had that day because they sure as heck wanted to shoot me down. And thank God they didn't have any bullets in those guns. So after I got through with my mission, I was getting a little low on fuel, so I landed on the runway and went to the ramp to get more fuel. And as I noticed one of these fellows walking down the ramp, and boy, he was mad. I could tell his face was big and red. He came swinging on down, and he kept trying to look in the cockpit. And he got closer to me, and you see, I saw him coming. But before I get out of an airplane, I had a little pocket down here in my lipstick and my comb. And I took my hat off and brushed my hair out. And then I went and reached, and I got my lipstick. I put a little lipstick on, and then I jumped in the wing. And this young man came tearing along, and he looked at me, and he said, where's that pilot that flew that last mission? See, they hadn't had women over there before. I said, oh, I'm your pilot. I don't think he said what he was going to say when he saw it was me. He said, I'm going to report you. I said, you go right ahead. What did I do? He said, you scared the out of me and my boys. And I said, and where are your boys going from here? He said, well, they're going to combat, and I want them to live to get there. I said, you know, I want them to live after they get there. I thought of that in a hurry. Anyway, he might have reported me, but I never heard anything, and I kept on flying. Marie Mountain, her name was Mountain at the time, she was in my flight. She was tall and straight and very, she was always so proper, and she never raised her voice. She went out with this one instructor and in this airplane that was open cockpit, and he had done a spin. She thought that her strap broke, but I really think she forgot to put her strap on. But whatever happened, she didn't have the strap on and she fell out. We were all so excited. The truck went out to pick her up. We thought, oh, now Marie never gets excited, so when she gets back, she's going to be really excited. Well, we're in there hardly able to contain ourselves because Marie is going to lose her cool. She walked in and she straightened her tie and she said, as soon as I realized that I had left the aircraft, I counted to 10 and I pulled the chute. We could have killed her.
One day, a visitor arrived at Avenger Field looking for Betty. He had flown his airplane from Minnesota to propose marriage and bring her back home.
His name was Ambrose Maresca. He had a farm west of town. I would be living on the farm, and he did have an airplane. He had a little Aranca, and it was a nice little aircraft, and we could have a lot of fun with that. I didn't know because I loved to fly those larger aircraft. I said, let's go get a couple rooms. The hotels were all taken. The only place we found was a house, and she had one room to rent. Ember says, oh, that'll be okay. So when we got in there, I left the light on all night long. There was going to be no hanky-panky. And I didn't go to sleep till after he went to sleep. He stayed for 2 days. We talked all that time. And so finally he said, as long as you can fly my airplane. I say after 2 days, I thought, oh, well, what the heck. I could go home and I could fly his airplane. He wanted me to fly right back with him. I said, oh no, I've got to check out. I got to say goodbye to my planes and my girls. He said he'd fly back and pick me up in 2 days. And I said, okay. And I went back to our CEO and I said, Miss Teaton, I'm going to resign. She said, you're doing so great in flying. We would like to have you stay, Betty, but if you want to go home and get married, that's up to you. She knew how I love to fly. And she said, before you sign this resignation slip, I want you to take a flight in the 86. I took a flight in that 86. Oh, I got in that airplane, put the canopy over me, got up and the wheels went underneath and away I went. Oh, I couldn't leave that plane. I got off that plane, I went to that phone and I called him up and I'm not coming home. He said, if you don't go home, I'm going to go home and marry somebody else. I said, you go right ahead. And we both lived happily ever after.
In 1942, motivated by patriotism and a chance for adventure, 25,000 women applied to the Air Force for flight training. Less than 2,000 were accepted. Like male cadets, they received 7 months of rigorous training. Of the women who started, 1,074 earned their wings. Under the command of Jackie Cochran and General Hap Arnold, the women were assigned to 120 bases across the United States. They flew 78 different types of airplanes, towed targets for gunnery practice, served as flight instructors, test pilots, and crisscrossed the country ferrying aircraft to pre-combat destinations. When the WASP program ended in December of 1944, the women had flown a total of 60 million miles. Though the WASP weren't an official branch of the military, the hazards they faced were real.
She had been a pilot before she came into the service. A very, very accomplished pilot. He was flying formation with her and he got too close to her and cut the wing. It was a very sad situation. One came in and the sun was in her eyes and she was blinded by the sun and she crashed. Oh, it was a terrible, terrible thing. We had 38 of our women killed in the service. They were not treated as military personnel. The family got a call from the CEO of the office saying, your daughter was killed in an aircraft today. We have her in a pine box. You send the money and we'll ship her home. And if they didn't have the money, we'd take a collection to see that the body got home. And that was the way it was. When I got out of the service, I had a 4-engine rating. I had a pursuit or a fighter aircraft rating. They needed an instrument pilot. I went and became further advanced in my instrument so I could train the guys. So I went to Northwest Airlines with all my credentials. I thought, oh boy, they look at this, I can just decide what I'm going to do there. They were very impressed with that, the resume I gave them, and they would like me in their front office. Well, I told them what they could do with their front office. I said, no, I wasn't interested. Well, then In about 1994, I think it was, I had met a lot of the Northwest Airline pilots, and they had asked me to come and speak to them. I said, sure, I would. So I thought, oh boy, here's my chance. So I got there, and I gave 2 programs that day. This wonderful young man met me, and he wasn't very sure that he wanted to show me anything, but he said, would you like to go in a simulator? And I said, oh, that'd be different. I said, when I was flying, I had no chance to fly in a simulator. I had to get in the airplane and try. Yes, he said, I know. But he said, we'll fly in the simulator. So we went in the simulator, 747. And so he said, well, what do you want to do? I said, I want to do a slow roll. Slow roll? He said, sure. I said, you said I could do anything I wanted to do. So I did a slow roll. It shook and quivered and quaked. And then we just flew around a little bit, of course, in the simulator. And then he backed out, and he came and he landed the aircraft, and he just breezed it in. He said, he pulled it out again, and he said, okay, let's see you land this craft. Now, they had buttons and dials and switches, and it was filled. I had 5 instruments in my little aircraft that I'd been flying. Mm-hmm. So I looked at all these things, and I thought, well, tell me, what speed does your craft land at? And he told me, and I held it at that speed, and I waited, and I thought, there comes the runway, and then I backed out back a little bit, and I greased it in. I said, thanks, God. So anyway, then he said, I don't believe that. We did it 3 times, and I greased it in every time. And he said, you know, you sure surprised me. He said, I guess you are right. You could have flown these airplanes.
Finally.
So anyway, when he got on board, when he got to talk to the people that I was to speak to, he said, you know, I didn't think this woman could fly airplanes. And he said, I take my hat off to her. He said, in fact, I was against women pilots. I just didn't think women pilots could fly airplanes. He said, but after flying with this lady, I have to admit women can fly airplanes. And so he said, boy, she breezed in that plane like you can't believe. And so I got up there and I said, well, I tell you, now I can tell you how I feel about what you did to me. 55 years ago, there wasn't anybody there but me. The rest were all dead or retired. So anyway, I said, I was very upset with you 55 years ago when no one would hire me. I said, I had all the credentials. I could fly anything there was to fly today, those days. And these days, I said, I could fly them all. But no one gave me the opportunity. But I said, I want to thank you for the opportunities you're giving the young people today. And because of what this young man did and showed me all these that beautiful simulator, and he let me do all that flying, now I forgive you for what you did to me. They got a kid chuckle out of that. We had a lot of gals who went into engineering, and they'd always take the airplane up to be sure that it's safe for the men to fly, because they felt that, we were doing their job, and so we checked the plane out, because after all, they were going to war and we weren't.
You were sort of military, but not exactly.
That's right. We did everything we should do as a military personnel. We took the oath of the military to say that we'd obey all their laws and rules. We flew all the aircraft they told us to fly, all the missions they told us to fly, we did. And we were to be a part of the Air Force. We felt badly because we weren't recognized as veterans for a long time.
On March 10, 2010, in a ceremony at the nation's capital, about 200 surviving members of the Women Air Force Service Pilots of World War II accepted the highest civilian honor bestowed by Congress, the Congressional Gold Medal.
Today, I'm glad the women are having the opportunities they have, and they feel that we broke the mold for them, that we set the place to where they can now do these things. And I'm glad that they're having this opportunity today. Mm-hmm. The sky's the limit for anyone that wants to do what they want to do. It's out there for them if they want to work for it. I tell you, I've loved every day of my life. I don't know which day is better than the other. I've just been very, very fortunate to have done what I've done, to have my beautiful family and a supportive family of my siblings. I've had a wonderful life. I wouldn't change a day.